Good morning, everybody. Good day, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Neil Heller with Anomatic. I wanted to welcome everybody to our webinar. We've got a great lineup for you today. We're going to be focused on addressing customer cloud data limitations with privacy-enhanced entity resolution. But before we start, I'd like to share a few housekeeping items. First, if you have any questions, please use the chat functionality. We have disabled webcams for all participants, as well as microphones for participants. So if you have any questions, put them in chat and we will address them as we go. And with that, I'd like to introduce our two speakers, Matt Fleck, who is the founder and CEO of Anomatic. Anomatic has built a simple one-step software as a service solution, which allows organizations around the world and in every industry to protect your personal data from being exposed by de-identifying that data and allowing it to be used as if it were fully identified. I'd also like to introduce our other speaker, Richard Stocks, who is the head of commercial sales for Senzing. Senzing entity resolution software allows you to quickly add the most advanced data matching and relationship discovery capabilities to your applications and services. Richard and Matt have prepared a great conversation, great presentation. We hope everyone finds it very informative and helpful. And with that, I will turn it over to Matt Fleck.
Wonderful. Thank you, Neil, and thank you everybody else for your interest today. We've got some really exciting things to talk to you about and hopefully be as interesting to you as it is to us. So I want to start off when talking about the need for data privacy. We've all read and heard many times about data breaches and companies who have allowed the data that they were obligated to protect to be lost or stolen. Even when data is protected from outside threats, theft or loss of data from internal causes is also a huge problem. That is a major reason why the number of regulations and data privacy compliance obligations, all meant to protect people's data, is on the rise globally. And the pace is only increasing, where an estimated 65% of all data will be under data privacy regulations. To make a complicated situation even worse, the massive increase in the amount of data and the types of data that organizations are now managing and storing is growing at a phenomenal rate. All of these restrictions add significant costs in time and money to the budget of any project which involves identified data. Identified data is any data that is directly linkable back to an individual person. When initiating a project like this, there are requests which must be made, seemingly in triplicate, to be able to get access to the needed data. Additional manual, procedural, and system protections must all be put in place, certified, and audited. Once these procedures have been implemented, the owners of the data and the chief officers responsible for data access and data protection need to sign off on those procedures, often sending teams back to the drawing board for requirements which may not have even been in place when the project started. And then, only after all this data has been rolled into the budget can the real impact on cost be known with any accuracy. To call this a mess is being generous. So over the years, people have come up with approaches and solutions. While never quite perfect, each one provided some level of protection, which would allow the necessary checkboxes to be marked off with at least the defensible position. But speed, security, and just plain old functionality were always trade-offs that had to be made. This is because in data security, there really has been nothing new. There are new ways to apply legacy technologies, or maybe evolutions in those technologies, but basically the same old tired approaches. Take homomorphic encryption, for example. For years, it languished as a solution which would come about one day to solve everybody's problems, but it was always just too slow to be feasible. And someone figured out how to make it run faster. But guess what? It's still slow, and it severely restricts the value of the data it's meant to secure. So why bother? All of these options really only make the matter worse. They tease you with some capability, but never give it all to you. In fact, after all the time, money, and effort to put in these solutions, you still have significant challenges. That is because none of these options allow you to fully use the data to do critical functions like link your data, merge it, share it, individualize it, enrich it, and most importantly, resolve entities. That is because legacy de-identification technologies leave data dumb, and dumb anonymous data is not all that useful. But don't worry, there's a way out. It's called smart anonymous data. It lets you do everything you wanted to achieve with identified data, but with none of the PII. Let's take a look here and compare dumb anonymous data to smart anonymous data. Smart anonymous data, which is data that has been de-identified using PII Vault's patent-pending polyanonymization process. As we see with legacy solutions, your data has little practical value. It may be used for aggregation, but little else. It can't be linked, merged, or provide any sort of return path. On the other hand, smart anonymous data is better and safer than unidentified data. It can be matched and merged at the individual level, provides an optional return path, enables selective re-identification when permitted, and supports international privacy compliance obligations such as right to be forgotten, limited retention, localization, and geographic limitations. With smart anonymous data, Anonymatic has pioneered PII as a service. With one solution, you can satisfy most, if not all, of your global data privacy obligations. You can deliver on your responsibility to keep your data safe. And you can empower 100% accurate data science results in less time and with far less overhead with other solutions. You can use as much or as little of PII as a service as you need for your organization and your projects. You can safely move your on-prem data to the cloud without violating data privacy obligations or requirements such as data residency. Fully de-identify each data set with one simple process we call pass-through anonymization. Identified data goes in, data de-identified according to the rules you define comes out. Fully mask your data so you may use production data in non-production systems using the exact same simple one-step pass-through process. You can enrich your data with individual level third-party data or monetize your data by providing data enrichment to others. Our pass-through process also provides the ability to re-identify data using the same mechanism as used to define the de-identification rules. Pass-through re-identification only restores those specific values needed for that specific workflow. I'll show you an example shortly. And of course, re-identification is not something every organization wants or will even be permitted to perform. It is a protected process which is completely unavailable and impossible unless specifically included in PII Vault license. These capabilities, used individually or collectively, have been designed and built to satisfy all of your data privacy requirements while simultaneously enabling you to maximize full value of your data. All of this while adhering to strict data privacy compliance obligations, such as data residency, right to be forgotten, and others. Finally, we also support privacy-enhanced entity resolution with Senzing. Now to tell you more about this is Richard. Richard? Now, Richard, you're on mute.
Well, that's just bad timing on my part. All right, appreciate that, Matt. Thank you. So, Senzing, we define entity resolution as recognizing when two observations relate to the same entity, even though they have been described differently, like in these two records here that Senzing would bring together. Likewise, and inversely, though, Matt, make the next click, recognizing when two observations do not relate to the same entity, despite having been described similarly. You can see that Robert Smith Sr. and the Robert Smith Jr. record only differ by the one letter, J versus R in the junior versus senior. But we go beyond just the resolving of the unique entities, and this is whether it's individuals or organizations, but we also relate them so that you know not only who is who, but who is related to whom. And that's really very powerful stuff. And Senzing is is built for the builders to be baked into any application and any workflow.
Wonderful. Thank you, Richard. So now let me take a few moments and walk you through how this de-identification process actually works. Starting with data which comes from any source, such as an on-prem database, a cloud service provider, or even flat files. The data that comes from there carries inherent risk. This is because the business data, whether it be financial, healthcare, consumer events, or any other sort of data, is identified. It is the PII in this data which identifies the business data that makes this data risky. This data flows through the PII vault pass-through anonymization process. In this step, all of the PII is removed from the data and stored in the PII vault. We'll show you shortly why that's safe. And it's this data as it's processed by pass-through anonymization that the business and de-identification rules you've defined are applied. The result is data that has been fully de-identified. Attached to each record is what we call a poly ID, short for polyanonymous identifier. This is a consistent, unique, non-hashed value, which may be used immediately to link all the records for the same individual without ever knowing who that individual is. When this data is stored in the data warehouse or shared with internal or even external data processors, they have all the data they need, but none of the risk, costs, and technical overhead that always accompany identified data. This is because the data is anonymous and it has little to no exposure if the data is lost, stolen, and additionally, access to the data may be granted to a lot more people. At the same time, the data in the PII vault is safe because there's no user access to that data. There's no non-PII in the vault, and there are no shared values, keys, tokens between the data in the vault and the data in the warehouse. It's also encrypted via multiple technologies, and you can bring your own encryption keys. A lot of approaches allow the de-identification of data, but because they only generate dumb anonymous data, that's where they stop. PII Vault keeps on providing unprecedented capability. Take, for example, when you need to combine data from multiple disparate sources. This flow on screen right now is the same flow that we just walked through. What the PII Vault enables is that you can add a second or a third or 20 more data flows, all using the exact same process to de-identify their data. In this example, the data from each source is de-identified and tagged with their own unique poly ID for each individual. So the question is, how do you use this data when there's no common value to link them? That's where the PII Vault comes in again. At each step in the life cycle of using identified data, PII Vault has discrete capabilities which remove the risk of performing that step. Let's start with those 3 de-identified data sets. In this situation, an authorized process requests from the PII Vault the Senzing generated linking table. Here is where the privacy enhancing entity resolution from Senzing pairs up with the privacy enabling de-identified data from an automatic. When the Senzing generated linking table is combined with the de-identified data, all the records may be combined at the individual level without any PII ever being exposed to the process. Pause for a moment to let that sink in. We just took data from 3 entirely different sources, even 3 entirely different companies, de-identified it all at the source so it could be safely shared. We applied powerful AI-based entity resolution, and then we linked all this data without ever exposing sensitive personal information. So this begs the question, how to make use of this anonymous data? Sure, we could do some great work on the aggregate data, but how do we use individualized results? Great question. Let me show you an example marketing use case. In this situation, we have just completed the merging of the multiple de-identified data sets we just walked through. We now pass that data onto our AI process to generate individualized results. These results are still anonymous, so there's no way to use them, right? Wrong. Here's where the PII Vault comes in again. With PII Vault limited re-identification, the result, and only the result of the AI process, may be passed back through the PII vault and re-identified with only the attributes needed. In this case, likely just the first name and the email address of the individual. When that's done, is all the data with all the details is completely separated from all the identifying details. PII Vault serves as a wall which prevents either side from being exposed to the other, and therefore removes the obligation to enact all of the measures we discussed earlier. Let me show you an example of how this works in real life. Here is a quick little dashboard that shows two companies who have combined their loyalty rewards programs to evaluate what's the overlap of customer penetration. It's easy enough, as we see in these first two bar charts, looking at the customer sales by region, for them to report on this data individually. But how can they identify where are the shared customers, who are the shared customers, and where are they sold unless they share all the identifying details? The answer is with Anonymatic and Senzing. With this technology, anonymous information can be shared and combined at the individual level to do combined reporting. How does it work? So here is the data that would actually come in and be used from one company, say the company that's going to be acquiring the other. As you see, we have the sales information, we have a completely anonymous poly ID, and then we have the entity resolution work by Senzing. That's been done for the one company's data, it's been done for the second company's data. Finally, Anonymatic and Senzing provide this linking table, which will provide the links between the two different poly IDs to tell you which anonymous identifiers belong to the same person. Quick, simple, and absolutely secure.
Now, how's that security handled, Matt?
Great question. Let me talk about that. PII Vault is a unique situation. We really are the first company to ever concentrate fully on protecting and securing PII. It's all we do. And because of the sensitivity of the data we protect, we needed a unique and groundbreaking security model. With this model, we believe the data stored in the PII Vault will be the most secure data in your organization, bar none. Let me show you why. First off, PII Vault is a containerized solution. It is deployed remotely into your organization's infrastructure. So no PII ever comes to Anonymatic. And in fact, it never has to leave your firewall. Second, all we store is the PII. Sure, it's sensitive data and we need to protect it, but because we never store any of the data it identifies, the risk of having PII is a tiny fraction of that same data were it to actually identify anything. Third is polyanonymization itself. With polyanonymization, no values used to represent an individual outside the PII Vault actually exist inside PII Vault. It's designed this way so that if anyone were to ever breach all of the protections and see the raw data in PII Vault, there would be no value that they could ever use to link the data outside the PII Vault with data that's on the inside. Of course, the entire database is fully encrypted with industry standard AES-256 encryption. This is where most solutions start and stop. It's in the middle of our model. What is often the last line of defense in data protection is called column level encryption. It's only used sparingly because it incurs incredible overhead. PII Vault implements patent pending technology we call data sundering. With data sundering, essentially every value in our database is fully protected with column level encryption, but with two key differences. First, it's immune to brute force hacking, and it also provides near clear text performance. Want to add some extra protection? Bring your own encryption keys. When you use your own encryption keys with PII Vault, your keys are paired up with Anonymatic's keys, so that neither you nor we have the full key value which is used to provide the access to the data. Additionally, there are no non-API access to any of the PII data, no screens, reports, or other access. The PII Vault's job is to store and secure the PII only, with no user access to the data most of the methods used by hackers to access data simply don't exist. Finally, and this is worth repeating, all of your PII stays within your own firewall. I mentioned earlier that PII Vault is a containerized solution. So is Senzing. What this means for you is that you get to deploy this capability within your own firewall in however you have it set up. On-prem, in your private cloud, in a public cloud, it is completely up to you. So in summary, with Anonymatic and Senzing, you can supercharge your data science efforts, migrate everything to the cloud, use your data anywhere you want, and iterate faster. All of these capabilities are fully containerized, scale as you need, and the cost is likely much less than you might think. Certainly, it's less than if you tried to build these highly specialized capabilities yourself. Best of all, everything we've shown you today is available today. Thank you for taking the time to watch this. We'll be happy to take some questions now.
Thanks, Richard and Matt. That was just absolutely fantastic. We did get some great questions. And the first one is, what about GDPR and right to be forgotten? How does this work?
GDPR and right to be forgotten are great use cases. For those who don't know, people in the European Union and growing regions around the world have the right to ask an organization to forget their data. The problem is when that organization does it using any of these legacy approaches, they either have to purge all that data, which means it kind of disappears from their reporting, or they're in a process where trying to take their data out is just physically impossible. With Anonymatic PII Vault, what we simply do, remember that linking table? That linking table will never include any records for that individual. So the organization has all the data they need for their reporting. They'll still show all the sales. They'll just never know who it went for. And so therefore, that data is usable according to GDPR.
Great. Thanks for that, Matt. We've had another really interesting question. And this question from one of our attendees is, people in my organization have been talking a lot about homomorphic encryption. How is a PII Vault better than that?
I love this question. So with homomorphic encryption, it's a newly deployed technology where different organizations who are going to share data have agreed in advance on how to encrypt data so that calculations can be formed or performed on those encrypted values. It's a pretty secure method, but what it does is it inherently and immediately puts you up against a brick wall. The brilliant thing about data science is that as you learn something about your data, each answer leads you to another question. And you want to be able to ask that question and get the next answer and get the next answer. And that's how you get real insight. But when you use homomorphic encryption, you have to program into that encryption exactly what questions you can ask. So while you may get an answer, you're dead in the water when it leads you to ask another question. So PII Vault doesn't have that limitation. You get to use that data to ask any question you want and to continue asking questions and drive to real business results.
Fantastic. And we've got time for just one more. And this is kind of specific from somebody who wants to actually engage in a POC. So how does a POC work with customers' data when they can't send the data because it has PII?
If we go back to the diagram where I was showing you the boxes and the data flow, and specifically where we brought in a second and a third data source, that's the paradigm that they would use. One organization is that main line where they have de-identified all their data, and then doing a POC with a customer's data, that customer can use the PII Vault, completely de-identify their data, and they're sharing anonymous data. That's the beauty and the elegance of the PII Vault solution, where people have for years wanted to be able to do certain projects, but they couldn't because they couldn't get a hold of the data. It is infinitely easier to go and ask somebody to share their data with you if that data is completely anonymous. So when doing a POC, you can go to your customer or your prospect and say, if you send us anonymous data, we'll show you the value we can do with it, and you never have to risk sharing or the identifying details. So that's a great value for Anonymatic and the PI Vault and what we can provide. And when paired with Senzing, being able to link that data together without ever having to risk those identities being exposed, everybody's a winner.
Fantastic. I'd like to thank Richard and Matt for sharing this great approach on entity resolution and data privacy and really taking it to the whole next level. If anyone has questions, please feel free to reach out to Anonymatic or Senzing. We'd love to answer any other questions or provide information you might have. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us and wishing you all a wonderful day.
Thank you.